Welcome to The Prescription, the Tax Policy Center's biweekly webcast on fiscal policy for the COVID-19 economy. This is one of a series of conversations with state, local, and federal government officials, as well as leading economists and other experts. I'm your host, Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at TPC and editor of our blog, TaxVox. Our special guest today is IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig. Mr. Rettig has been commissioner since 2018. Previously, he practiced law with the Beverly Hills tax controversy firm Hochman, Salkin, Rettig, Tosher, and Perez. He has his JD from Pepperdine University and an LLM from NYU. Before we begin, a bit of housekeeping. This event is being recorded and will be posted online at TPC's website in the near future. If you'd like to join the conversation on social media, please use the hashtag #LiveUrban. And if you'd like to suggest a future guest for The Prescription, just email us at info@taxpolicycenter.org. Charles Rettig, welcome to The Prescription. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much, Howard. Appreciate the invitation.
You obviously had a very challenging 2020. And let me just start by asking, have you reached the bottom of that pile of unanswered mail from the early days of the pandemic?
We actually are current, believe it or not. We have millions of tax returns still in process, but they all are in process, what we received. And just as a brief frame of reference, about end of June, beginning of July, we had about 23.4 million pieces of unopened mail. We went into fiscal 21 with a few million pieces, and we are now current, and we're not too far off of where we would be in the ordinary course. So the mail is not an issue for us going forward. The pandemic is still an issue, right? Social distancing and all, and that's what led to the backlog. But we're in a good place.
Great. So tell me a little bit about the lessons you learned from the pandemic experience in terms of the workforce and the way the IRS does business. So there are lessons that you carry forward from the pandemic experience.
Howard, I actually missed that question. It didn't come in clear.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Hey, Howard, you might want to actually switch to phone audio. Sorry, everybody. But yeah, it's coming through pretty fuzzy. If you go to next to your microphone, there's an up arrow and it says switch to phone audio. Sorry, everyone, technical delays.
Am I coming through clearly?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you.
I can't hear me. Bear with me just a second.
Or maybe, Howard, do you have a headset with a microphone?
No, it's not. It's just that's what's waiting. So let me.
Okay. Yeah, you can switch your audio to dial in. If you see the up arrow next to your microphone button where you usually mute and unmute, there's switch to phone audio option, and then you can dial in.
If you'd like, while Howard's dialing in, I can give you sort of some general updates.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yep. We, and certainly when Howard comes in, Howard just, cut in. But, coming on board at the end of 2018, we certainly thought I thought the lapse in appropriations was one of the biggest events I was going to have to interact with. And former commissioners said, the rest of your term will be somewhat easy compared to that. And then obviously, we ran into the pandemic, and very, very proud of the employees at the Internal Revenue Service, how we handled it, how we reacted to it. And, really with a view for, as we say, a view of the mission and understanding the importance of our responsibilities to the people in the country. And then similarly, myself and others understanding the significance of what we were entering into with respect to the pandemic. And, really it's something you can't see. And we have 80,000 employees, which means we have 80,000 different concerns that we needed to respect for the pandemic. And, we have people of all age categories. We have some people who, wanted to come into the office regardless. And we had others who still don't want to come into the office and whatnot. So in line with that, we needed to also carry on our mission. And this came up during, as you know, during tax season, filing season. And I am the guy who essentially shut down 511 facilities throughout the world, brought in our foreign attaches while we tried to figure out how we were going to be able to respond in this situation. And we're very proud. I think that we were among the lead federal agencies just to begin shutting down facilities and really sort of paying attention to where our employees were in this. And then similarly, we had to come back. We couldn't stay in a closed environment. We had to get to a virtual environment as quickly as we could. We did very well, I think, with respect to that. About 82% of our employees are telework eligible. On average, about 72% actually telework currently. There was one day we acquired over 20,000 computers, I think 50 something thousand peripherals, which are the cables and whatnot that go with it, and with the laptop computers. And we're able to distribute those to employees, but it's beyond just getting our employees laptops. The ones who became telework eligible needed to be trained. And that's something that we had to undertake, again, in a virtual environment. I think we're very proud of how we got into that. That's not to say that it didn't create a lot of difficulties for people we interact with, whether they're practitioners, other agencies, and certainly, individual taxpayers, whether they're individual or corporate or whatnot. I can say clearly that I think we did the best that we felt that we could do. There's a lessons learned in anything like this, and certainly we have the lessons learned. I think with Howard, we'll talk about, the generations of the economic impact payments twice during 2020. And we got Howard back.
Great. So let me actually ask. So I'm still having a lot of trouble with my audio here.
Yeah, it's still coming back pretty crackly, Howard. Did you try to connect your phone versus?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Not great, no. Did you try to connect your phone?
I'm connected with my phone.
You are connected with your phone. Try just disconnecting and reconnecting if you can. Like logging out of the event and then coming right back in.
Okay.
Sorry, Commissioner. If you want to just.
We're good.
Okay, great.
So we had difficult times. We've done very well, I think, in the pandemic. We paid attention to health and safety regulations, around the country, localized. We actually have a system where we break it down to a multi-square block area, not just to zip codes and whatnot. But I will say that the big pride, and was the reason I came on board, was I knew a lot of IRS employees, and to try to see if we can make a difference, support the employees, support practitioners, support taxpayers, and make a difference up on the Hill. And we did not know that we would get a big jump start on that by our ability to actually deliver economic impact payments to the country alongside everything else. I think the CARES Act was signed on March 27, and on March 25, we put together the People First initiative, which, to give an example, it went from a discussion in my office to implementation in less than 5 days. And it was, what do we have the authority to do to lessen burden on taxpayers and others during this period of time, and then figure out a time zone that we could do it. And it was already in flight about moving the April 15 filing date to July 15. So we went to July 15. But there are a lot of provisions in the People First initiative that we still have in flight and have been done very well with respect to that. We extended payment terms, and such. I think about 150 different avenues that we took to. Another silver lining is the agency went to digital signatures significantly, and myself and probably many of you and others for the last 20 years have been trying to get the agency into a digital environment, whether it's digital signatures, whether it's, accepting email, large file transfers and such. The agency had to assume certain risks that I think historically it was not prepared to assume. It's a very risk averse agency, but under the COVID, environment, we had to get there. And so look for that to remain where we can. I think you should look for us to stay in a virtual environment indefinitely. We will ultimately have to shift certain of our functions back more into traditional means of communication and interaction, but I think we've come a long ways, and certainly my hope would be that we, where possible, we stay in a virtual environment. And I know, folks on the outside are essentially pretty much planning the same type of thing. So we're a reflection of what the private sector is doing with respect to a lot of that. We took a tremendous care and feeling of responsibility for underserved communities during this period of time. Lower income folks who are not comfortable in the English language, the rural communities where they might not have broadband. There's tens of millions of folks in this country who don't have smartphones. They don't have the ability to communicate clearly in English, let alone read English clearly. To a certain extent, sometimes you might hear me refer to myself like that. I'm a public school kid from Los Angeles, the first one in my family to go to college, and grew up in an environment where work hard and that's really your future. And so I think many of you are also aware that my in-laws are in the country and do not speak English. I've said almost every time I've been out speaking, I'm very proud to be, to my knowledge, the first commissioner, son or daughter, active duty United States military. And my son has deployed twice. And also to be the first commissioner whose spouse came into this country as a refugee. And, I grew up in Los Angeles, a very multicultural town, and certainly the neighborhood I grew up in was like that. And so certainly came in with eyes on underserved communities. And, one of the significant points that I think not only myself, but folks inside the IRS incredibly proud about is how we've gotten into providing services and assistance in different languages. For the first time this year, the Form 1040 for tax year 2020 will be available in both English and Spanish.
Well, Commissioner, I think I'm back.
You're back? Okay. Great. I was just at your points, so.
Okay, terrific. No, I heard you, and thank you. You actually anticipated some of my questions. Let's actually stick on this issue of communication for a minute, because I want to ask you about the fact that the agency has really struggled to communicate effectively with taxpayers for a long time, and that was magnified by the pandemic. I've heard taxpayers have tried and failed for months to get the service on the phone.
Yep.
Increasingly hear from tax professionals that they're having trouble getting the service on the phone. So give me a sense of what you're doing immediately to try to improve your ability to communicate with taxpayers who just have basic questions, or with tax professionals who have questions.
We went down a number of different lanes. Keep in mind that initially we shut down our facilities. We have 15,000 customer service representatives, which is essentially our phone team, people able to answer phone calls. But when we were shut down, only about 3% of them were telework eligible coming into the pandemic. Now all of them are telework eligible. So we had to shift significantly, which involves, laptops, peripherals. They have to have, secured areas to work in and the rest. So we did a pretty good shift there. We were at the same time running lanes for tax season, 2020, filing season 2020, as well as the economic impact payments. We took a lot of pride that within about 12 days, I think the CARES Act was signed on the 27th of March. And on the 10th of April, we actually delivered to Bureau of Fiscal Services. You know, IRS doesn't issue the payments. IRS delivers files to the paymaster, which is Fiscal Services. But our first tranche of payments was 81 million payments for $147 billion. And I think significantly by the end of May, TIGTA did a report in June going through our first 159 million payments and said that we were 98% accurate on the first 159 million payments. I'm not sure I would have predicted that on the front end or during it, keeping in mind that, you know, you have to put yourself in the mindset of March, April, May, and we did as to people, recipients of payments, as to people trying to get their tax returns filed, as to tax professionals. Also, it should be known that when there's hurricane, earthquake, wildfires, we deploy as many as 3,000 of our 15,000 customer service representatives over to FEMA. And there were both, during this period of time, there were both hurricanes and wildfires. So when you take 15,000 and you cut it down to 12,000, and then they also had to be trained to telework, we had to also flip into trying to get as much of the information as we could to people in a different method. And that really was trying to direct people to online to the extent we could. We opened up certain mailboxes. We opened up a congressional mailbox because our congressional phone lines essentially were overrun. You know, I had the bright idea, well, a congressional mailbox we can serve 24/7, whereas the phone lines, you know, people need to get an answer, need to know that we were receptive to it. And I think we had over 30,000 inquiries come in from Congress on behalf of constituents through the congressional mailbox. So then we backed off of that, and we actually hired a contractor during the process. We created a phone system where the thought was to try to answer as many questions with a recording. You got to the end of the recording, you could pitch actually to a live assister who was a contractor, couldn't give you specific information, but they could give you information as to the IPs, and then from there to us. They actually
let me interrupt. Let me ask you though. I mean, and I'll tell you, I'll be right, full disclosure here. I was one of the people trying to get in touch with you because I had to wait 9 months for a refund, which I finally got on December 30th. You couldn't get to anybody. I mean, the problem is you would get on a phone tree and you get to the end of the phone tree and they would say, sorry, we're busy, and they'd hang up. So you never got a human being at all. And it seems to me that, as I say, I hear from tax professionals who say they've had the same problem. I just wonder, is there a plan to try to improve the phone service so that people can in some way, I mean, you don't do email, snail mail wasn't going to work, so people in some way can communicate with the service? Is there some plan in the works?
Well, that's where I am, and that's where we are. And I think, as you know, I was 36 years as a practitioner on the outside. I know probably 6 or 7 or 8,000 practitioners on the outside. I probably heard from 5,000 during this period of time, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, sort of my eyes are there. But in terms of the phone system, it's, you know, people have, we're in a much better place now because we have telework ability, where previously we were just completely shut down. And we have the processing of going through certain gates, whether it's a recorded message to actually a live assister. And at the end of the live contractor assister, they actually get to a live IRS assister who actually can go into the system and see where you are. We also peeled off through, you know, we created on EIP1 and we put it into play again on EIP2. But the where's my get my payment portal, as well as the non-filers portal. And those were launched both in English and in Spanish. And the non-filers portal, about 8 million people successfully were able to get us their information so that we could actually get them a direct deposit. The Get My Payment portal was about 14 million people who gave us actually banking information, because there's a large population that's unbanked otherwise, or doesn't give us that information associated with their returns. But the real bottom line on a lot of this is a comeback pitch to electronic filing. We were still processing electronic returns. We still got over 90% of the refunds on e-filed returns out within 21 days. We were processing electronic payments, electronic refunds, and the returns themselves. The ones that got pushed out for a filter when our systems were shut down, obviously, sort of ran into we needed to have a set of eyes on that, manual adjustments, and we didn't have those people. And so I think going forward, one thing about teleworking, obviously we're back in our campuses, socially distanced, but with teleworking, we have more space in other arenas where we didn't before. So some of our processing folks are sitting where they might not in the ordinary sense, but we could bring all of our processing people back in and could go forward during a pandemic.
Let me ask you, given the communications issues, will you adjust deadlines for responding to IRS correspondence without requiring people to pay penalties and interest?
Well, I've routinely said that if I was on the outside and the agency hit me with a penalty on something, I would start out talking about COVID. What the agency is going to want to know is, did somebody try their basic homework? What did you try, right? We're very sensitive to not a carte blanche penalty relief situation, but I can tell you that, our employees are just like everybody else. They lived through the same situation. Many of our employees have family members who are in the tax profession, or certainly are taxpayers, and they understand it. And so I would expect people to find us to be quite open and accepting in terms of any types of penalties that might come. We continue to look at a lot of different avenues associated with that, and we will. Again, I'm the first tax person to be sitting here since Peggy Richardson in 1997, but I had 36 years of representing individuals on the outside who had difficulties with the service. I said recently to a group, I've been hung up on by people at the IRS. I understand what that is. And, IRS people will say, yeah, but you don't understand, how the practitioners deal with this. And I get it. And so I can tell you that not just myself, but the people on the front lines and the people between me and the front lines, we get it and we understand the difficulties. And I don't think that there should be a feeling that we're going to ignore these difficulties. It should be, to the contrary, where we can be respectful, you should fully expect us to be so. And if you end up with somebody, you have to also look at the culture of the agency. This is a culture of an agency that, sometimes on the front line, it's you're a collector, go collect. And our managers were trained, get the people to go collect. And so then during the pandemic, we had to say, no, you need to talk to the people and you need to understand what's going on. And, it's a shift. And a lot of these managers really take their situation to heart and their 20 years of experience to heart. And for us, they get it and they hear me and they understand. And we have town halls. And, I think the world of these folks, but we're trying to train people differently in a pandemic. And I think we're doing pretty well. We'll see how it goes with respect to the filing season scenario. And I think, Howard, I mentioned to you earlier, I get it at home too. My wife's a tax accountant. So, it's my
hopefully she can get you on the phone.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues that the service has a reflection of the budget. And let me just ask you, can the agency function at a high level with its current budget? And if not, how much do you think you need in an additional operating budget to properly fulfill the functions Congress has given you?
The agency, certainly before I got on board, the agency always had the ability to rise to challenges. The IRS, it goes without saying, 2010 was the high water mark. The IRS could use significant resources across the board in services, enforcement, operations support. The current budget will actually allow us to replace attrition in most of our functions. That has not been the case for most of the time that, certainly the time that I've been here, but there was a hiring freeze between 2011 and 2018, which creates a huge gap, both experience and just, on attrition. We've got, over 40% of the agency eligible to retire in the next 2 years. You can't train, you can't make a revenue agent a 5-year agent in 1 year, and you need the experienced people there. So in terms of budget, that's beyond the IRS itself. We're just a tax administrator, and that would be Treasury, the administration, and up on the Hill. I can say that I think that there's strong bipartisan support to financially support the Internal Revenue Service at this point in time. That includes, our IT lanes as well as others, because they get it. A lot of people were concerned about the ability of the IRS to push economic impact payments out during a pandemic. Between individual refunds and 2 rounds of economic impact payments, we pushed out almost $735 billion, each time unleashing it within a matter of weeks or days. The 21 Act, the second round of EIPs, we actually released 147 million payments, totaling $142 billion within two days of it being enacted. Again, I wouldn't have necessarily predicted that, but can we do better? Sure. Each one of these has some lessons learned inside of it.
So let me ask you, you mentioned the payments, and of course, you're going to be starting the next filing season on February 12th, which is a little later than normal, but not really totally out of line. What happens to filings to the 2021 filing season if Congress tells you to send out another round of relief payments in what would be the midst of a tax season? Can you do both things without having to delay the filing deadline?
I can say that the IRS stands ready to serve and assist the American people. We read what everybody else reads. We need some time to program and reprogram. And I think, as most of you are aware, the qualifications for EIP 1 were different than the qualifications for EIP 2, and that we can't have a clawback. So if we overpaid somebody on EIP 1, we can't just net all these numbers on a 2020 return and figure out what it should be. So if we overpaid for some reason, they get to retain the overpayment. That's actually what led to the February 12th filing deadline. Was we have, you're probably aware of, we call it a dark period, where we're actually inputting information from the last filing return, which helps us identify consistency in returns. It's a fraud issue. So we're in that dark period. Once we come out, we will do 2 different tests of returns. But the important fact, I think, is Free File opened January 15. The software services are open for accepting returns. They will deliver the returns to us on February 12th. And I think most importantly, we get around 25, 26 million EITC claims each year. The PATH Act, we can't release those until after February 15. And they total around $64 or $65 billion to people who certainly need those funds. Part of pushing filing season was so that we did not have a situation where, as we're looking at EIP 1, EIP 2, and what they're actually entitled to as a recovery rebate, that we did not delay the EITC numbers for people, the refunds, because a married couple at certain levels, you're talking $6,400, and the last round of EIPs was $600. We would not want something with the $600 to delay the $6,400. And so, point in fact, we're opening February 12th. We will deliver the refunds on March 1st. And last year, even though we opened on, I think it was January 28th, we delivered on March 2nd. So our systems are there. We're there. It was really a testing and to try to have a seamless season where we're not tied up on the back end. So we needed to make that adjustment.
So, Commissioner, we just have a minute or so left. I want to ask you a broader question, if I can. We live in a time of obviously very deep distrust of government, especially the federal government. Do you worry that this attitude threatens the stability of a voluntary tax system?
I worried about that on the outside with some of what I saw from people, and just, read the indictments that come out, the tax-related indictments that come out every day. Read the indictments that have happened with respect to the PPP loan applications. You have people who file for a loan application saying they have 100 employees, et cetera, and they have none. What I've said internally to our folks is, those guys don't respect us. They don't think that we're out here doing our job. And if those guys don't respect us, the people who are voluntarily complying might also not respect us. And so, the honest people want to stay honest, but when you think the guy next door maybe has taken advantage, you're in a difficult economic environment. Your degree of honesty might be different. So I look at as, the strong enforcement efforts, and we've been very strong throughout the pandemic, really support the people who voluntarily comply. But I worried about it on the outside. It's not unrelated to why I came in on the inside. I've given a lot of insight in terms of to IRS employees, And a lot of the programs, you'll see my fingerprints are all over these of, where we need to be, one, to support the people who want to voluntarily comply, but also to aggressively go after the folks who don't. And, they should be examples, both civil and criminal. You'll see every employee, every compliance employee at the IRS has a commitment to fraud awareness. And I get quarterly reports from all the business operating divisions as well as from CI on both civil from the fraud, from the BODs, civil fraud assessments, as well as criminal referrals to CI and then referrals from CI to the DOJ. The average business person doesn't want to be stuck with a fraud penalty. They certainly don't want a criminal case, but we're here for that. And I believe in that. And so, we created a fraud enforcement office this year. We created a promoter investigation office. You look at the listed transactions that are out there. I don't believe we only have like 2 or 3 listed transactions. In 2000, there were over 20. I don't believe that there's only 2 or 3. I believe that there's a lot more than that. We need to get into these communities, find these transactions, list them, and certainly be very aggressive with respect to the promoters and the people that should know better. These are not unsophisticated taxpayers. And then coming back to the less sophisticated taxpayers, we need to support them. And so in part, that's the English language. We have tax where we ride circuits. So where we don't have staffing to put maybe a taxpayer assistance center somewhere or to staff it through attrition, we send our people in and they'll be there next Tuesday, whether it's, it's a secure environment, but a post office or a VITA site. We've been very aggressive figuring out how we can get into the communities. I'm still a believer in traditional lines of communication, in-person, telephone and whatnot, where we can. And I understand the benefits to the agency and others where we can do a virtual or online environment. But we need to service everyone. One thing I understood on the outside, but has really been highlighted on the inside. We serve people who are very unsophisticated, who may not even speak English. But one of the proud moments for immigrants, I can tell you, my wife's entire family, April 15 every year, they get to demonstrate they're as important as every other person in this country by filing their return. When I got on board, we only did things in 6 languages. And I joke and say one of those was English. How are we supporting people who want to get it right, the voluntary compliant part of the audience, by only doing things in 6 languages? You can call into our phone service now and get translation services in 350 languages. This is, I opened these doors, but I really like to say, this is a public school kid from LA saying, when I'm in the grocery store line in LA, there were 10 languages and we're an agency doing things in 6. So we can do better. The last thing, I would really say is, the gross revenue of the IRS for fiscal 19 was $3.56 trillion. That's about 96% of the gross revenue of the United States of America. We shifted from going up to the Hill to say, give us $1 and we return 5, which pretty much every commissioner has said. And, I believe, and that doesn't even take into account deterrence. It doesn't take into account, our tax gap map doesn't take into account the virtual currencies that have, a $1 trillion market cap. Wait till those come up, as we get into the more current years. So I'm not a believer in some of the statistics that are out there. I'm a believer in what I know from being on the street. But what I do know is when the military goes up and asks for money on the Hill, and they got the flag on their shoulder, and I'll joke and say, it's how many $1 trillion can we give you guys? So you should have noticed pretty much when I got on board, having a son in the military, we shifted, and the stars and stripes, the flag is on our progress report. It's on our PowerPoints as we go out and do things. Because if this country wants to be successful, I'm a believer we need a successful IRS, both from the enforcement side and the voluntary compliance side. And the voluntary compliance side ties into trust and respect for us, and we need to earn that. And so a lot of people want to get it right, but we need to help them get it right. You can't expect, people to just understand it. And I don't mean to overstate this, but, even people who can carry on a daily conversation in English, they're not going to get the tax aspects, right? You drop a word, amortization, depreciation, in front of somebody, they're not going to get it. And you're frustrating them. We can do better. You're going to see a Schedule LEP on the 2020 return that allows people to check a box as to what of 20 languages they would like us to interact with them in. I think it's spectacular. And we're just starting in that arena. So I believe people want to get it right. I'm an optimist as to people, but also, we the IRS, as well as we, the US government, need to show people that we're here for them. We're serving people.
Commissioner, thank you so much. We're out of time. I really appreciate it. And apologies again for the technical troubles. You obviously know about technical troubles.
For sure.
Given your last year. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you again another time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.